tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. That was a really beautiful invitation, sadhu. So this morning we're going to have what I think will be a fun three-way talk, what Machi calls a Machi sandwich. So just to draw out that analogy, you've got bread, mayonnaise, bread. And what we'll be talking about is the three characteristics. That chant that we did on page 72, so 3 characters, 3 characteristics. And we did a survey earlier this week, and we each chose which characteristic we wanted to speak about. And the metaphor came to mind this morning that it was kind of like choosing your initial Pokemon. So for me, Bulbasaur, Dukkha. Got this mammalian, I guess, I don't know what Bulbasaur was, but this very earthy unsatisfactoriness, Dukkha. The fiery wisdom of Charizard, and the liquidity of Squirtle looking at anicca, or impermanence. Dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, the fire of not self, and the liquidity of anicca. So we'll each go into one of those. And to start, we'll jump into dukkha. And there's one takeaway. This isn't always clear in people's minds, but there's lots of different types of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness that are spoken of in Buddhism. But 2 main ones are really useful to get our minds around. And that is the dukkha of the 3 characteristics. And again, this isn't like dogma. It's not like, Christian people believe in the divinity of Christ, and Buddhists have to believe in these 3 characteristics. But these are investigations. Is it true? Can I test this? To what extent can my experience, or can the world be permanent? To what extent is it pleasurable and enjoyable, lastingly? And to what extent is there this enduring self? So these are investigations, experiments. So we look at them like that. So we've got the dukkha of the 3 characteristics and the dukkha of the 4 noble truths. So the dukkha of the 3 characteristics is a universal truth, as it's said in that chant that we did. So sabbe sankhara dukkha. All conditioned things are dukkha, unsatisfactory. And this is just all things, not just human bodies, human minds, but everything. The walls are dukkha. So what does that even mean when you're used to translating dukkha as suffering? So the dukkha of the 3 characteristics is almost the dukkha of physics. So words like stress, or tension, or torque, or strain, or just the rubbing, the vibration of the molecules of the universe bring about this inherent rubbing, this friction. And so all conditioned things are dukkha. Okay? And the 4 noble truths, the dukkha there, the first noble truth, is optional dukkha. So you've got this great framing by the mindfulness-based stress reduction, Jon Kabat-Zinn, that pain is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. The pain, the physicality of having a human body, that pain is unavoidable. But suffering, the suffering of 4 noble truths, is optional. Or another formula that you might hear is that pain plus resistance equals suffering. So another Buddhist simile that you find is the simile of 2 arrows. So all beings, enlightened beings, and all the rest of us, we're called patujanas, or thickies, is Ajahn Jayasaro's translation. The thick of us, those of us who are very thick, and enlightened people, we all have this physical dukkha, the pain of having a human body, of just feeling internal tension. The molecules of the body are constantly doing their molecular thing. But the difference between an enlightened person and the rest of us is that this optional suffering, they've fully understood the psychodynamics of how a human mind takes normal pain and problematizes it and creates suffering. And they just don't do that anymore. They've seen through it, practiced enough of taking this backward step or this step up, this meta-awareness to say, okay, yeah, there is this physical pain, but I don't need to resist it. And then there's no suffering, no unnecessary suffering. So there's that simile of the two arrows. First arrow, unavoidable. But then what the rest of us do is jab ourselves with a second unnecessary arrow. In that sutta on the arrows, Samyutta Nikaya 36.36, Salata Sutta, the Buddha says that everybody feels this bodily-based dukkha, but the thickies among us add mental dukkha to it, whereas the enlightened ones among us don't experience and don't add on that mental dukkha. Another simile is that of a spark, like just the beginnings of a fire. And then we have the choice. Are we going to pour gasoline onto that fire, or are we going to allow it just to go out? So that's the choice. There's this spark of having a body, and would invite everybody now to just, okay, move down, move back and down from behind your eyes and dropping into the rest of the body. And just for a minute, okay, feeling this whir, this whirl, it's like a cloud body, the felt sense of having a body from the inside. The mammalian murmuring. It feels like we're inside of a murmuring. And actively in this minute, allow yourself, or even look, okay, what is this dukkha, this first type of dukkha? The unavoidable dukkha. Okay, the tension around the nose, the heat in the face, the stress of old knees, the strain and heat of blood circulation, this plexus. And actively, not just so much of our time, so much of human experience is about avoiding this first arrow. Okay, for this half minute, okay, I'm actually going to look for it and see what I've been running away from. And it's not like you look, and that's the problem, because you see it. It's there all the time, and we just cover it over. We run after this and that. In that arrow sutta, the Buddha says that worldlings, we don't see the escape from that first arrow. So we chase after sensual pleasures because we don't know escape other than gratification via the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. We're adding fuel to the fire because we don't know how to have the patience just to let the fire go out. An enlightened being, and those of us on the path, are getting better and better at seeing there is an escape aside from following our addictions, our compulsions, our habitual resistance to dukkha. Okay, it's uncomfortable to have a human body, to live in a human face, and to have the numerous diseases and maladies and pains, small and large. And sometimes people will talk about first world dukkha and third world dukkha as if to minimize the first world dukkha. But dukkha is dukkha, and yeah, our experience is what it is. And a lot of that first world dukkha is this optional suffering. So then as we're internal, we're with this interiority, how can we ease up? How can we let that fire just go out? The tendency to resist that first arrow. Okay, can I not jab myself with a second? The Buddha said that the first noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. Just being patiently with the itches. And you don't even know what to call them, all these weird little glimmers and pricks and jabs of just a normal human micro-phenomenological experience. And so yeah, this is our practice. Parsing out the pain, which is unavoidable, and the suffering, which is optional. Not stabbing ourselves with that second arrow. Not pouring fuel on the fire, on the spark. And we can get better and better at it. The Buddha didn't just frame things in terms of suffering, but also in terms of sukha, the opposite of dukkha. We can get better at sukha. Better and better in stepping back from that initial spark. And it actually feels good. And I'll pass it off to the mayonnaise. Venerable mayonnaise.
Actually, I don't like mayonnaise at all. This is the last thing. Yeah, last thing, anything mixed with mayonnaise. So, but this is the training. Did you say mayonnaise, right?
I did.
Yeah, so whatever, mayonnaise, anything. But anyway, we're not here talking about the like and dislike. And we were trying to deal with the dislike. So when I heard the word, I said, thank you, Dhamma, for teaching me, like, deal with the dislike from my, favorite ajahns. And again, I will be squeezed because I'm in the middle of the sandwich. So we see that what Dhamma is being squeezed out, because it's not me talking. I think it's just Dhamma flow into this space, and then it was great learning. I was so dwelled into listening to that, I forgot that I have to give a talk. Anatta is a very interesting concept. As Ajahn Kavilo addressed earlier in the dukkha category, that people, this is not like a philosophical term, but some people would treat some of the profound Buddhist terminology as kind of a piece of philosophy, but it's much more useful than that. And it's usually translated, or very often translated into not self or non-self. So when we look at what self, I think, in some traditions, we have a better translation for people to avoid some misunderstanding. And we call it like no controller or no ownership. No owner. There's no a fixed identity or unity behind all the phenomena. And this is most like the human get deluded because it applies to anything like humans, sentient beings, and all existence apply to this ball and everything that we see. So, because our grasping on that is so strong, and we don't even see how and when the grasping happens, how it develops. Like when we study our breath, we don't even know that where it comes from, where it goes. So it just shows how little we know and how we are blind to things that we think we know. For instance, like the water. And water, we call it like water. So water, water, and water. I said water 3 times. People say, why is she repeating? It's the same water. But in these 3 words, that moment when I said 3 times of water, the water in that 3 very moment are not the same water, because they are constituted by the oxygen atom and the oxygen atom. So it's just the result of this atom or ingredients constantly interacting with each other or aggregating. So when we give a name, it's just like for the convenience about we address something. But the water we're talking, like saying, the match you're seeing now, and the match you're seeing now, there are two different matches. Because there's some cell in this body die, and then the relationship, the action, interaction between the four elements we call, form any kind of life force, like the water, the earth, the fire, the air, they are changing their relationship to each other. And then applied to ourselves, we usually relate this as, we point as me. We don't point to him as in me, right? And then so we relate so much about our body, and we really identify this as this I, me, mine, and we really develop a life around this false view. So the body is just like 32 parts. It has different elements, and it's changing all the time. So this not self or non-control, it doesn't mean that there's no existence of such thing, but this thing is changing all the time. It's not fixed. And but how can we apply this? People think, okay, I can understand this, sort of, but so even in the mayonnaise, you can study the ingredients of the mayonnaise. You think that actually the moment you scrape it from the bottle and the moment you put it on your sandwich, they are actually two different mayonnaise. There's something already changing. We don't see it in the eyes. We don't feel it with our fingers. We don't taste the difference in our mouth. But doesn't mean this is the truth we see. It's some false fact we believe. It's only conventional. But it's not the fact. It's not the truth. The truth is much deeper. So use AI to Google anything, like say the microphone. What's the ingredients of this? What's the ingredients in the water? What's the ingredients in all the objects we use? But most important, when we're talking about how we relate to our human life as, to free us from all these sufferings and then develop this ultimate happiness, is to study the sentient being's mind, or human conditions. It's very important that in a very plain word to study and then introduce this anatta and concept into our life is try to get less personal, to be more objective. In which way? Say, whenever see everything, we have like and dislike object in our life, and I see, okay, there's something this mind like, there's something this mind doesn't mind. So start with there is, for everything in our life, including ourselves, rather than I see, I have, I am, I like, I dislike. We start our life with I, we, they, our country, our planet. Maybe, we're not even realize that, human chauvinism is being neglected big time. And this is also, we cause so much damage to this planet. So in daily life, there's some tips for us to cultivate this anatta and put this really profound concept into this, we call it the path to liberation, the path to free ourselves from all kinds of suffering. So whenever we see some form, and we probably, just Google it. What is it? Is this something that my eye tell me? And then, very important, straight away, whenever I see, for instance, I see the watch, this land currently by Ajahn Nisapo, and straight away say, okay, there's a watch. And then straight away, we will have feeling arises towards this object, like or dislike. For me, I experienced a like, pleasant feeling arises when I see this object. I say, okay, but instead of saying, I like this, switch it to, there is a pleasant feeling arise in this moment towards that object. This is what we start to understand anatta. This is the way to liberation. This is the way we have a chance to free ourselves from any suffering that will follow by not practicing this way. Because, say, influence, if I dislike this watch, I said, why the monk carry such a pretty watch? why, how the hell he can have time to spend all these things and make it even pretty? I don't even have a watch. See, this is falling from this, no anatta at all. It's full of I, me, mine. This is how the causing suffer. But then we point this arrow back to this monk and said, he caused that. He's putting on the robe. Why he putting on something so pretty? What is his practice? So it's go on, and the next moment, I will be also pass this, maybe my aversion towards another monk, thinking maybe he has a watch too. And I look at that, I said, I want to have a watch like this. So this is what we totally get in caught of this personal war without even aware of this. At the early beginning, I said, our blessings start from being aware. And so we stop acting blindly. From the object we see, we study, this is not only just water, there's so many truths within that. We need to study if you have the curiosity. And there's a feeling to arise right after the eye stay in contact, the ear stay in contact, the hand stay in contact with the object. We see, okay, there's a rising of a pleasant and unpleasant tone. And there's a neutral feeling to that. So there's not I am feeling, there is a feeling to that. And second, there is a thought. Either memory, there's a thought to recognize, oh, this is water. Oh, what did it do? If I choked by water, and we will feel like, we were fearful towards the water. This is only simile. The water is not, I think, scary, I know. But then, if you dislike the water, or if you like the water, you're going to just try to get a guggle. If you don't have a chance to guggle down the water, you will get angry. You think, what hell, how can I get my water? Sorry, I'm having this heavy language from my mouth. I'm very localized, I think. See, it's a language I didn't practice. I don't know how all these lay words just keep pouring. I really apologize for that. It's not the Samavaja, I think, not the right speech. I'm going to have to ask forgiveness, I think, after that. So there is not wise words floating through this Mechi's lips. So yeah, it's very important that, the memory. But there's no like I remember what things. So sometimes if we get hurt in the past, we could apply it easily. It's a pattern. But this pattern doesn't need to be there all the time. So whenever we see there's a form, and there's a rising of the feeling tone, and there's a thought or perception towards that. It's not I have thought, I think in this way. And then upon that, it's very important that comes the tricky part with the intention. The volitional intention. You want to put, if we're not careful, if we put everything personal, we're going to act blindly upon like and dislike, pleasant and unpleasant, should and shouldn't. It's going to be endless. It's a loop that keeps us again and again repeating the same pattern. It's so boring. If life is to repeat, why being born again? Right? It's like you're eating the same food for the whole life. Will you get bored? But when it comes to study the mind, and people just get bored so easy, and they just really accept that boredom happen. So we don't need to be that. It's like starting from everything is me and pleasant or like personal. We can put everything like there is. It's in a very objective way. So there is a desire to do something, but we can choose either do it or not to do it. So take this watch. Sorry, Giancarlo, I have to use this watch as a simile. If assume that I do have like I, if it's not anatta is not being introduced into our daily practice, we will. The moment we see this watch, it's a watch. Oh, it's a pretty watch. I like it. I wish I can have it. I may find a skillful way to maybe keep it for myself, or skillfully ask to have it. This is all the volitional action. It started, this is the important thing, because we started creating layers after layers from that moment. It's not from how we feel, it's not from how we think, it starts from how we want to act, from body, speech, and mind. So this is certain, I'm having that, I speak about this is speech, I'm holding on that, and this is the action. I want to keep it forever, and this is the mind. So these are the three doors. Usually either we leak or we guard it for further leaking. From seeing there is. Even there comes to this very dangerous point, there is a volition, there's such a strong drive, want to do something, But if you see, so let's say, for instance, I really want to hit somebody. Do you raise your hand to do that? Do you really speak from that? So it's okay, we had a leak in our mind, but the hope to practice, to understand anatta, is we have choice. We don't act upon our speech. We don't act upon our action to let the leak take us further. And then the last one is like, whenever that we feel that, actually the volition has a door to leak. When we feel like something, say if it comes to our eyes, we want to, it's some like a nice object. We want to, if we see that there's a craving for that, we want to look at it more. Or we don't want to look at it more. So it's act through the sense of seeing. So vice versa, there's so many, different examples to that. What I try to cut it short is like all these big concepts in the Buddhist, they have a way to practice. And then for this anatta, the best way to practice this is that whenever you think I, everything started with I, step back, take a few deep breaths, and then contemplate. Is that so? If I have my body, I can stop it aging. I can stop getting sick. If I like somebody, I can keep them in our life forever. Does it really always the same, as we wish? So if the answer is no, that it's a good time for us to step back and then detach us from this craving, this wrong view, this called self-identification, thinking everything is I, me, mine, or it's from I, me, mine. It has to be benefited from, on this I, me, mine, rather than there's not me, there's one person, there's only one woman in white robe sitting here talking to all the other, there are many people to listen, that's all. And the practice is just simple like that. So start your day with there's a breath, and there's a death. They're parallel. Thank you.
That is Ajahn Kovila's watch. This is mine. It's much simpler. It's a gift. I think alongside these really profound teachings, what will remain with many people is the idea of a mayonnaise sandwich. And maybe I might replace that with a s'more. What actually keeps coming into my mind now is a Simpsons episode where Homer mixes a bottle of vodka with a can of mayonnaise and drinks it, and Marge says, "Homer, that's a really bad idea." And Homer says, "That's a problem for future Homer. I wouldn't want to be that guy." And this does actually relate to this topic, actually, in that the three characteristics aren't ever spoken of or described as that within the suttas by the Buddha. They're described as perceptions. Only in the commentarial tradition are they elevated or framed as the talakkhana, or characteristics of all conditioned reality, and to some extent beyond. But the importance of that distinction is that when the Buddha frames them as perceptions, there's times to apply them and there's times to not. So when Homer is contemplating his cocktail, when we're contemplating the effects of our practice, of the effects of keeping or breaking our sila, our virtue, when things are difficult, you don't want to bring up necessarily the perception of not self with regard to your own moral purity. Karma has effect, and our actions have great implication. And so in that case, looking instead to that continuity. But there's times when the perception of impermanence, of dukkha, of not self, are beautifully key qualities in the mind, of yoniso manasikara, appropriate attention. Yoniso comes from the word yoni, the womb. Manasikara, action of the mind. The Buddha said one of the 4 factors of stream entry leading to the first level of awakening is yoniso manasikara. How do we steer our gaze? How do we think and contemplate the world? What lens do we see it through? And when we asked Bhante Gunaratana what teaching of the Buddha had remained to him throughout his whole life, he ordained as a novice when he was 12 years old. He said, the contemplation of impermanence, anicca, has stayed with me this whole time. And the Buddha said, if one contemplates impermanence, it leads to the ending of the defilement of becoming, of sensuality, of ignorance, of the conceit I am. It leads to awakening. And when in the suttas, I was speaking with one of my relatives and I said, one of the key aspects in Buddhist practice is bringing the mind to calm. Just as the body becomes strong through movement, the mind becomes strong through stillness. And once you bring the mind to calm, you can see truth. And my relative asked with a certain amount of skepticism, oh, what's truth? As if we would know. And yet, when the Buddha talks about that key flash of insight that leads to the first glimpse of awakening, of truth, of the irreversible alignment with Dhamma, it's just this. That which is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. That which is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. Things are impermanent. But when you really see this with a heart that is calm and luminous, when you contemplate it day after year in your life and see that rising and passing, the heart no longer reaches into a liquid looking for a solid, and you stop taking things or trying to take them as a self. You stop tying your heart to the world, and so the world stops being able to break your heart when it breaks. And when that happens, you are not left with nothing. The Buddha said the deathless nibbana isn't the opposite of anicca, which would be permanent. He said it's amata ajata, birthless, deathless, beyond time. The Buddha was not a pessimist. He was a doctor giving us the appropriate diagnosis because there was a cure. There is a path and a light at the end of that tunnel and a medicine. And if you tell people about the 3 perceptions, they'll say, okay, things are impermanent. And then you say, well, things are also stress. And they'll say, all right, okay. And then you say, things are also not self. And they'll be like, what? Anicca is the catalyzing, accessible element, and yet it cascades with the luminous mind into the most profound insight one can have. It's accessible, relatable, daily practice. Ajahn Chah, when he spoke about the key to practice, he would talk about things being mene, which means not mayonnaise, uncertain, not sure. Me, or mai, means not, and ne means sure, not sure. Can you just apply that? He said, just keep that in mind all the time. Not sure, not sure. Anicca doesn't just mean impermanent. It can also mean uncertain, changeful, is Ajahn Jayasara's translation. Not sure. And you'd be surprised how powerful that perception kept in mind is. When you're so convinced you're right, not sure, uncertain actually, 95%. Can you give it 95% instead of 100? When 2 of Ajahn Chah's monastic disciples disrobed to become Christian missionaries in Burma, Longpo Sumedho came up to him and was lamenting this disrobal, and Ajahn Chah said, well, maybe they're right. You never know. Not sure, not sure. I find it so helpful, not sure. Just add that, and it hamstrings that sense of upadana, of clinging, of the self-righteous self. It makes the hand let go. You can also, after a certain phrase where you're so sure of something, say, and that's anicca. That's not sure. That will change. And this is the key element of sati, mindfulness, or one of them, is just seeing time and again how things arise and fall, because we miss it because we jump into the next birth. It's like you're on a train and you're moving very quickly. And so everything around you seems to be moving at the same speed. It all seems very solid. If it's moving, wait, this is the opposite of what I meant it to be. If you're on, okay, 2 trains, moving at 10 miles an hour one way. No, so two trains. Okay, I might want to back away from this analogy. 2 trains moving at the same speed and things are moving by you, or a train by a river. Let's do that. And it seems like it's still, because samsara is a river, but if our heart's moving, jumping into the next thing, then you never get to see, oh, things end. What does that mean? The heart never absorbs that, and because it never absorbs that, it continually grasps and is confused when what it grasps breaks. But if you bring the mind to stillness, if you don't jump into the next birth, but be with the cessation of something, say, oh, that ended. Or just take note of when something really shifts. Many of you will have this experience of being on retreat, and over the course of a 5-day retreat, you'll just develop these opinions of people. You'll get your nemesis, maybe the person sitting next to you who breathes too loudly. And how many have had this experience of after retreat, you actually talk to the person, and you're like, oh, that person was lovely. Like, what was that about? This is the moment. Take note of how uncertain our perceptions are, because it's so easy to jump into the next thing and forget. So as the mind absorbs that, there's no way of the heart, this has to sink in at a deep level, and there's no way of the heart letting go of this burning hot ball of what it clings to without, it's very hard for it to let go of it without really being with its burning some. And this is why patient endurance was considered so key in the Buddhist practice, as if instead of when the suffering arises and you feel the surge of the mechanism of achieve or control or jump in so you might be heard or express the anger or try to diffuse the sense of bruising of disappointment or failure or some way of escaping dukkha, running, where you never get to see how it shifts. If you instead have patient endurance, which the Buddha called the supreme incinerator of defilement, and just know that your duty in those moments where suffering is rising in you, where the heat is there, is just to comprehend dukkha and to not act from that spot. Because if you do that, if you sit with the fire, if you sit in the fire, you'll find that it changes. And you haven't created any new karma, and you haven't distracted yourself with the new relationship or the new conversation, and you see it fade. And what you see when it fades is that you're not left with nothing, not just a darkness, but the darkness becomes a doorway. Your hand fills with sunlight. The Buddha said, for one perceiving inconstancy, the perception of self, not self, becomes steady. They exist in inverse relationship. So you'll see a majesty on the other end. And just to know how hard that is, and yet that, to some extent, is the whole of the practice. Watch as that deep sankhara, that patterning, that volitional mechanism of achieve, jump in, solve, the heat rises, the whoosh, and don't act from it. Sit in the fire and watch as that fire softens you, burns its way out, and the old karma dissolves. You don't act from craving. And what you're left with is peace and a deeper understanding of impermanence at the other end of that. In some sense, that is the whole of the practice. And to have compassion for yourself with how hard it is to sit with that fire. Because the fire wants to go out, like Ajahn Mechi Paññāsiri says, the leakages, which is another word for the asavas, the taints. You want to go out and express. And when that happens, know your whole duty is to turn in and come and stay with it until it passes. That's our duty. And then you see impermanence. That's your whole duty. You don't have to solve the problem. You just have to not act from that and trust what that'll do. T.S. Eliot in the Four Quartets said, Wait without hope, because hope would be hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love, because love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, yet the faith and the hope and the love are all in the waiting. The faith and the hope and the love are all in the waiting. And then to see finally the brilliant effect of impermanence. It lets you hold the world more lightly. All things will break. All conditioned things will break. When I came back to the US during political upheaval, Longpo Sumedho said, yep, Sankaras rise and Sankaras fall. I was like, okay. It's true. Like Ajahn Chah said when he held the glass, I see this glass is already broken. And this is not a dour recollection. If you see that all these things will fade, how could they not? You can't live on one continual inhale. And every exhale gives rise to another chance to an inhale. Then you stop tying your heart to those things, and then you begin to perceive, if you have right view, if you've touched this path, there is a luminosity and a deathlessness that the Buddha pointed to, which is beyond all that. We are here for a brief moment to learn something and to give, and to develop something beyond this conditioned realm, the warp and woof of this cloth and this weaving. There is something beyond. So mayonnaise, not sure. Mayonnaise, not sure. And just to keep that in mind, and know also we can miss the impermanence of the good too. Notice how you change year after year. People miss this. Notice when you notice after a difficult conversation or something, a year ago, I would have had a way different reaction to that. Take note. Take note of how the path is changing you. It is worth rejoicing in. Sadhu.
Dhammayang dhammakata sadhu karang dadama sahe.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami.
That was beautiful and fun. Ajahn, when you were speaking, this thought came to mind that something that would be super gross was that if there was a fourth characteristic of the universe and it was mayonnaise. So gross. So gross.
It's kind of
delicious, maybe? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Okay. We have time for a few questions. If anybody on Zoom had a question, you can raise your hand. If anybody in person has questions or thoughts you'd like to share, we have time for a few. Yeah, Nitnoy, please.
Good morning, Ajahn and Meshi. Thank you for the talk. And so I just reflect on what today talk about three characteristics. But you know, as lay person, we had like duty and we have like things around us. And as community, like I see our daily life sometimes had come across some injustice and see, you know, injustice around in everyday life. And, you know, as practice Buddhism, we kind of understand that thing is impermanent and can changing and it's uncertain. But in the same time, when we live in daily life, those things are kind of very tough to come across with. And I just want to hear what your wisdom over those things when you kind of live in it. And it's just take a long time to like really go to the other side of it. So what is your thought? And as, you know, a community, how we like act upon that, because we cannot just sit there and look at it. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll pass to Meiji in a second. We get her very rarely. I would say that the beauty of these perceptions is they're accessible very much in daily life. The perception of impermanence, things change. It's so visible in patient endurance. I've been surprised at how amazing a Dharma practice Zoom calls can be. Because in Zoom calls, like we've had a few of these, and watch as you want to jump in and express and just stop and watch that fire fade and kind of the grace come in the other end. Like, that's the ground of our practice, is daily life. The Buddha didn't give us something just for sitting on the cushion. And if you're able to get that ballast of a meditation practice at the beginning of your day so that you have some grounding, then as you move into the day, you'll be able to contemplate this the whole time and learn to let go better. Your daily life can be the exact place to bring these to bear. They're accessible, especially, I'd say, well, no, all three really are, but certainly not sure. Meiji? Go for it, please.
I think there's not that much difference between the practice between the lay people and then the monastics, ever. So often we heard about, what's the difference, because the teaching from Lord Buddha is for everybody. And whenever, for lay people too, and for monastic too, we had our challenges too, is just don't get to see it. And we work on that. So I would just briefly say, it's not about, how can we apply this anicca, dukkha, anatta concept into our life, or how can we apply the Four Noble Truths, all this important core Buddhist concept into our life. But generally for the practice, this tip is whenever we feel, because I said it's hard. Watch the mind when we say, what do you mean by say hard? What made us say hard? There's two intentions, there's two elements that would probably, I would invite you to study. I might be wrong, but, it's fun to study. First is the wanting mind. The mind wants the result. So whenever before the result appear, due to its cause and condition, when the condition and the result and cause is not supporting such result to come or to occur, and the mind is getting so agitated or anxious, and then they just suddenly feel that this whole process and this practice is getting very hard. This applies to any situation, and also the second thing is that, it doesn't see the point of doing that. That means, always people say, I cannot do it. I said, no, you can. You don't want to do it. So feel the difference. Can't and don't. And, whenever, and I say, I just developed this very interesting, lot of terminology since I arrived this country. I feel, endless grateful for I got so inspired at every single moment. And I keep having this line rotated in my mind, is the silver lining in the Buddhist sense is seeing the defilement. The silver lining in the Buddhist sense is seeing the divine, meaning like whenever you find something is hard, there's an issue, and there's always like some mental. I'm not here talking about, because Ajahn Kovilo gave a beautiful talk on the difference between the pain and also the suffering. So the body will have some suffering, some pain, but we're talking about the mental suffering, the mental pain. Whenever there's any mental pain or mental disorder or mental health issue, you think, I'm feeling discomfortable. And then watch for the cause of that. This is more important than us to flick over the sutta and try to find the meaning of anicca, dukkha, anatta in its definition. But it's very important. You can say, okay, whatever is rising, even this feeling is impermanent. But why I keep it with us is there's something, there's two actions. One is push it away. Also, keep it stay with us. One is try to grab it when there's a pleasant and and like feeling there. So it's very important. Watch, do I have these two actions to interfere its natural process, which is it's subject to rise, it's subject to cease. Why it's not ceasing? Because I am interfering this natural process. I see anicca. This is I'm interfering. So switch that to there is. arising of some mental discomfort. And this mental comfort, due to the cause and condition to rise, or due to the cause and condition to cease. That's anicca, impermanence. And then this is really, it's always be this unsatisfactory feeling arises according to the first two nature of all these things, because everything arising will pass away. Everything we wish it to be there will pass away. And there's nothing, is the only order in the whole universe is orderless. So the earlier we receive that and accept it, the earlier we will free ourselves from suffering.
I think we'll have to wrap up in a minute, but a very nice Viktor Frankl quote, which I think is very useful, no matter if you're a monastic or a non-monastic. We all go through dukkha, and some of our dukkha is very poignant. And Viktor Frankl, of course, went through a lot of suffering in his life, but in this quote says that to bring forth light, you have to endure some burning. So just holding the burning of life in that way, that, okay, can I metabolize this into light? And now it's time for dessert, Devas.
Actually, no.